Hello, greetings, and welcome everyone to my first time doing an auto review. My technique may be a bit off, but I apologize in advance. I can get nerdy for those who would like to hear about the numbers if I decide to do another review. That is also contingent upon how many people actually like this video or how many views it gets, but this one is going to be a practical review. For anyone that offends, sorry, I guess. But today I will do a full rundown and review of my new favorite car that I've ever driven, the Honda Civic Type R. Let's begin at the beginning. I first spied the Civic Type R on an Autoblog site, and in my head I said, oh, it's just another Type R. I said this because for Honda's 20-year history of producing the Type R brand, there was absolutely no Type R vehicle that was released in America that I could afford. Here's looking at you, original Honda NSX Type R with a $50,000 plus price tag even today. Then later on in the article, they printed the words that were music to my eyes. Eye candy? Yeah, anyway. To be sold in the US were those words, and they were glorious. So 6 months and a questionable financial decision later, I owned one for a slight markup over the $35,000 asking price. This was the first manual car I ever bought, so needless to say, I was a little on the nervous side. My wife and kids being in the car with me heightened the anxiety, and the cream of the crop was the outlandish, polarizing, yet, in my opinion, handsome styling that is the Type R. Before we go any further, let's sidebar into the first manual car I ever drove. This was an old beater about 17 years ago. The clutch was gloriously broken in, and the flywheel was probably a half metric ton. Anyway, this translated to shifting that was easy and understandable and had a lot of wiggle room. The hardest part about learning that manual was the fact that it was hard to find the gear unless you were very intentional. This was a trend that every manual that I drove since followed. I said that to say that the Civic Type R would be a very different experience, and at that point I had no idea. I started the vehicle, and with little to no trouble, sidebar, I actually remembered to hold down the clutch, yay, I proceeded to place my foot on the gas pedal as I gently released the clutch. Everything was going right until I stalled out of nowhere. Well, out of nowhere is what I said back then, but now I understand where I went wrong there. At any rate, a few attempts saw me out on the road and directly into a parking lot to practice with my kids complaining and my wife chuckling. After that, I would only stall twice more up to the time of this video. Anyway, after a week or two, I began to notice things about the Type R. The clutch was light without feeling cheap. The gears were lightning fast and buttery smooth. The power was punchy and often jarring, especially in R+ mode. I realized that I loved this car. The more I drove it, the more it spoke to me about what I should and shouldn't be doing. Oh, on a side note here, I take a lot of side notes, I'm sorry. I know a lot of people say it communicates with you, but you really can't get a feel for it until you're actually driving it. The steering was heavy and responsive. It had a little bit of body roll, so little in fact that I swore I was barely turning, even at the most extreme points in my boy racer wannabe expenditures. Anyway, the only thing that I encountered that was difficult in learning the Type R was that it was too easy and too responsive. The car was trying to read my mind and doing a good job while I fumbled around thinking this was still the 15 plus years ago kind of manual transmission instead of the one bred for greatness that sits in the Type R. The engine noises, or lack thereof for some, were just right for me. I knew the car was powerful and so did those around me, but I was not super over the top loud. I hate being that guy that's gawked at in anger because my engine noise scared someone's sleeping kid at the previous light. Anyway, at highway speeds, the wheel noise was a bit annoying if I'm honest, but I'm not complaining since the wheels are basically 20 layers of Office Depot rubber band stretched around a rim, which is to say I knew what I was getting into. I obtained this car during a transitional phase in my life where we were looking to move into our forever home, or at least what we would consider closer to that forever home, and so as you could imagine, cleaning the old house was top priority to prepare for sale. This is where the wonderful trunk came into play. This thing, with seats folded up, managed to carry 3 30-gallon trash bags full of clothes, 2 computer towers, 2 monitors, knickknacks, paddywhacks, whatever terminology you want to use. It seemed like that trunk would never get full. At any rate, we hauled all of this stuff to the Salvation Army in working order and donated it. Another instance that comes to mind is when I picked up a new set of rims, basically the ones you see on the front of a Honda NSX, or Acura NSX actually. I was able to stuff 4 rims, 2 of them still in their boxes, into the trunk with seats folded down and still had visibility out of the back. When I checked the numbers at home, I realized the trunk in the Type R is class leading, which is something you can't really appreciate without photos, which I have none of. Just know that this video is not sponsored by Honda or anyone else for that matter, so I'm not being paid to say this. The trunk is way more than I expected for the size of the car. When I tricked my wife and kids into riding with me again, they acknowledged that the bucket and rear seats were very comfortable. So long as I'm in comfort mode, there was very little difference on a bumpy road between my previous Civic and my Type R, in spite of the super thin tires. The interior, while audacious, is beautiful and not cheap. Red is my power color, by the way, so this car is phenomenal from every angle, except for 2. The first thing I was not a fan of was the infotainment, but not for the reason you may think. Actually, I like the touchscreen controls, which puts me comfortably in the minority of about 3 other people on the planet. The volume slider on the steering wheel was a welcome addition to the progression of technology, though it could have been more responsive, which I found out you can adjust in the settings, so that's fun. Also, I have had no trouble with the standard navigation in the vehicle so far, though I will admit Google Maps has a significantly better handle on the concept of navigation. My gripe is a relatively silly one, and that's best explained by a story. One day I was sitting at a particularly long light, and I said to myself, "Hey self, do you feel like listening to some music?" To which myself replied, "Sure I would." I selected my favorite K-pop song by Hyuna, don't judge me by the way, and hit play. Little did I know, I adjusted the volume of my phone's Bluetooth to full, so my janky headphones would work, and needless to say, I'm blaring crazy with my windows almost fully down. This was an unusually warm December day in Colorado, and I had no way to flip the volume down quickly, seeing as I owned the 2018 Type R. Swallowing my shame, I repeatedly tapped the volume slider until it was at a manageable level and rolled away from the light, with death stares from people in their SUVs toting their baby on board stickers. The second gripe I had was fuel economy. As I mentioned before, this was my first manual in a while, and that translated to me trying often unsuccessfully to manage where my foot was on the gas at any given moment, and trying to work out how to get the best MPG to save money. The issue compounded when you consider Honda advises premium gas for this particular car. I started out at about 19 or 20 miles per gallon average, but I'm currently sitting at about 30 mpg in the city and 40 on the highway, which is, in my opinion, pretty good for a 300 horsepower car. So that part, as I said, is sorting itself out on its own, and I'm very pleased that this car can sip fuel instead of guzzle it, so long as you're not driving like a madman. To me, the Type R really is a love letter. It's a love letter to those who love performance and practicality, as well as those who would like to live out their fantasy as an extra on the eventual Tokyo Drift movie remake. Both of these demographics speak to me in ways I am embarrassed to admit, to be honest, but the Type R's influence in the market is undeniable. I have never driven, or for that matter, even rode in a vehicle that has the poise, potential, and proficiency the engineers behind the Type R must have put into this masterpiece of a vehicle. I believe that if you have the opportunity to come in contact with one of these beautiful machines around the time your current car is on its last legs, your lease is almost up, and or you have $34,000 to put on a car that's almost certain to become a collector's item, $36,000 for 2019, this car is a no-brainer. Well, that concludes this video, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you all for sticking around to the end. If you'd like to help me support my passion projects like this one, please consider donating to my newly started Ko-fi page. If you would like to like and or subscribe, please do so by clicking on the links provided. Also, if you'd like to see other videos I've done, you may do that by clicking on the links in this video. I do have a Facebook and a Twitter, so be sure to check those out, and I will catch you next time.